Hey everybody, this is 80Proppush's and today we are going to be teaching you how to make crème brûlée. In this recipe, it's only 5 simple ingredients, but we do have one extra ingredient that we'll be going over. Most importantly, you're going to have sugar, heavy whipping cream, vanilla, and eggs. Sea salt is a nice addition, and then finally the special ingredient. We have instant espresso coffee. This is because my wife is absolutely nuts about coffee, and this is her birthday, so she gets what she wants. While preparing everything else, you want to go ahead and start up some boiling water. In a mixing bowl, we are going to start off with 5 egg yolks. We are going to take the whites and get rid of them. You can make them into some kind of marinade, or you can make them into an omelet. With the 5 egg yolks, you're going to add in 1/2 cup sugar. And now that we have the sugar added, we are going to begin to incorporate the egg yolks with the sugar. You're going to whisk this until it gets a nice creamy texture. It should be silky smooth. And this is done, you could either do this as your first step, or you can save it for a later step depending on how fast you are in the kitchen. It is nice to have things prepared ahead of time, and there's nothing wrong with having this step out of the way if you are a little bit slower with some of the other steps. Once you have reached a nice creamy even texture, we have finished mixing the egg yolks. Our next step is going to be getting the cream heated to a simmer. With this, we are going to go ahead and add in our salt and our instant espresso. We are using 1/2 teaspoon of espresso and 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Once the cream has simmered, we are going to immediately remove it from the heat. Now that the cream is removed from the heat, we are going to use the world's largest measuring cup and add in 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla extract. In this step, it is probably more preferable if you have it to use 1 vanilla bean scraped, and then you can throw the pod in while you are heating the cream. I do not have vanilla beans, so we are using what we have on hand. I will now transfer over the heated cream into a cup that will be easier to pour and mix with. This is important because whenever we are incorporating the cream with the egg yolks, it is important not to pour too fast or too slow. So that way we are able to slowly incorporate the two without making scrambled eggs. This will allow the eggs to temper so that we are not cooking them and making them into a custard. By using a wet towel, I will stabilize the bowl so I'm able to mix with one hand and pour with the other without fear of the bowl moving all over the counter, much like I was spraying across the prison floors. When mixing the simmered cream to the egg yolks, you're going to pour the first half of the mixture at a relatively slow rate to allow this tempering process to happen. Once you have mixed in about 1 to 2 cups of this cream, then you can add the cream at a much quicker and steady rate. You're going to continue to mix everything the entire time you're pouring to keep the egg mixture at a consistent temperature. Now that we have incorporated all of the egg yolks with the cream, we are ready to pour the mixture into the ramekins. The size ramekins that are preferred to be used when making crème brûlée is going to be a smaller and oblong-shaped ramekin. I find the best way to add the custard to the ramekins is by separating the ramekins into the pan that you plan on adding the water to. Leaving one ramekin out, you're able to add the hot water into the pan without getting it into the bowls. You need to fill the pan up with hot water at least up to where your custard is going to be filled to the bowls. Generally, this is going to be to the line on the ramekin. By leaving one of the bowls out, it prevents you from adding water into the custard. This is why I don't add the custard until after I have finished adding the water. If I accidentally spill water into one of the bowls, I'm able to remove the water before adding the custard. If water gets into the custard, it will ruin the texture of the custard and it will not be able to be used. Once you have added all the water, we can now begin adding in the custard. We will take the pan very carefully and set it in the oven, which has been preheated to 325 degrees Fahrenheit. This will cook in the oven for roughly 20 to 35 minutes. The cooking time of this is going to vary due to the size of the bowl that you are using to make the custard in. The importance of the water being used in the pan with the custard is it's going to create a very humid environment for the custard to cook in. Without this humid environment, it will cause uneven cooking and cracking at the top of your custard. Once you get close to about the 20-minute mark of these cooking in the oven, you are going to want to check on them frequently. What we are looking for is the edges to be completely set and in the middle just a little bit of a jiggle. It should resemble jello in the middle, but be nice and firm on the edges. Now that the custard has been removed from the oven, we are going to start one of the most difficult parts of this process, removing the rennikins from the pan. I find the easiest way to remove the rennikins is by taking a oven mitt that's a square and whirling the edges of the oven mitt around the bowl to remove them. Once you have removed all of the custard from the pan, we are going to allow the custard to cool down to room temperature. I am using a cooling rack to help speed this process up. Once the custard has reached room temperature, we are going to set them in the fridge to chill overnight. Once the custard has set, we will be able to take them out of the fridge and begin caramelizing sugar over the top. But that will be tomorrow, so we will see you then. And with the magic of editing, that is now. Now that the crème brûlée has had time to chill, it is time to take it out of the fridge. Once taking it out of the fridge, you're going to want it to rest at room temperature for at least 30 minutes. This is important because you want the firmness to loosen up, and if you serve it too cold, it may take away from the flavor of the custard. After this waiting period, it's time to put a very fine layer of sugar over the top. Do not overdo the sugar, just make sure that there is a nice even coat that barely covers the top of the custard. One of the easier steps that you can do is you can brush the sugar out with a simple brush, or kind of shake it around. Just remember, more is not always better. With the torch, you're going to want to heat the sugar with the very tip of the blue flame. Don't hit the blue flame directly into the sugar, and just continuously move the torch back and forth. It's very hard to mess this part up. All you're wanting to do is go for a nice golden texture. A good indicator that the sugar has been heated adequately in one spot is you'll start noticing the sugar bubble. Once it starts to do that, about 1 second longer with the flame is all you need. If you go much longer, it will very quickly start to brown. Granted, even though you do burn the sugar here and there, most people don't find it that off-putting. Though it will bring out a little bit more of a bitter flavor, it is still enjoyable. But to get the best caramelization, it is best just to heat it up until you see it boil in just about a second longer and move on. If the sugar has piled too high on the custard or gotten clumped up in any areas, it will be very hard to melt the sugar down and make it caramelize. Be sure after you finish caramelizing the sugar, you give it about 3 minutes to rest and cool. Doing this step will allow the sugar to harden back up and give it that nice crispy top. When you scrape across the top, it should sound like this. And that, my friends, is crème brûlée. Enjoy.